239 people board a Malaysia Airlines commercial flight. No one knows it yet, but they are about to become part of one of the greatest enigmas in modern aviation history. A Boeing 777 that simply vanishes. No signal, no trace, no immediate explanation. And while everything points to an accident, the evidence tells another story. A story in which someone on board knew exactly what they were doing, because making a plane disappear isn't easy. But that night, someone did it. Flight MH370 is not just a mystery. It's a puzzle made of technical, human, political, and emotional pieces. This video is not just another theory. It's a detailed reconstruction in chronological order of what happened from takeoff to disappearance. Through verified data, official reports, satellite signals, and technical statements, we're going to understand how a plane can vanish in the 21st century, and why, more than 10 years later, no one has found it. It all begins like any other international flight. On the night of Saturday, March 8, 2014, at Kuala Lumpur International Airport, a completely routine flight is being prepared. MH370, operated by Malaysia Airlines, bound for Beijing. On board are 239 people, 227 passengers, 12 crew members. The aircraft is a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the safest and most modern planes in commercial aviation. Scheduled departure, 12:35 a.m. Despite a slight delay, the plane took off at 12:41 a.m. Estimated flight time, 5 hours and 34 minutes. As usual, the plane carried extra fuel, 7 hours and 31 minutes in total, including emergency reserves. But to understand what happened, we need to know who was in the cockpit. Two pilots, Captain Zaharie Ahmad Shah, 53, a man whose life was devoted to aviation. He joined Malaysia Airlines in 1981 and had logged over 18,000 flight hours, 8,659 of them specifically on the Boeing 777. He was so passionate that he built a professional-grade flight simulator at home, sharing tutorials on his YouTube channel. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, 27, less experienced but competent. He had 2,813 hours of flight time and had been flying since 2007. That night, Fariq would be the pilot flying, responsible for operating the aircraft, while Zaharie would act as pilot monitoring, overseeing systems and maintaining communication with air traffic controllers. This division is standard, and the roles rotate between pilots on different flights to keep both sharp. Up to this point, everything unfolds with absolute normalcy. With boarding complete and systems checked, MH370 taxied onto the runway. At 12:41 a.m., it took off, climbing toward its assigned route. The flight plan included waypoints, invisible but essential markers for controllers, among them Zaharie and Baitot, guiding the aircraft toward Vietnamese airspace. The climb was standard. At 1:01 a.m., the crew confirmed reaching 35,000 feet. 6 minutes later, at 1:07, they confirmed they were maintaining altitude. Shortly after, Kuala Lumpur Control informed the aircraft it was about to enter Vietnamese airspace and instructed them to switch frequency to contact Ho Chi Minh. The response was simple, routine. "Good night, Malaysian 370. That calm, ordinary phrase would be the last radio communication from the plane. But in an instant, everything changes. Seconds after crossing waypoint IGARI, the plane performed a maneuver no one expected. It disappeared from secondary radar, the one that uses the aircraft's transponder to relay position and altitude. This was not a technical failure. Data revealed the transponder was manually switched off from the cockpit. On a Boeing 777, it only takes a twist of a knob. But it wasn't just the transponder. The aircraft also made a sharp left turn, a 180-degree course reversal, veering completely off its original path. This maneuver cannot be done under normal autopilot settings. The only conclusion: someone was flying the aircraft manually. This triggered a chain of misunderstandings and delays, costing precious minutes. The handoff between Kuala Lumpur and Vietnam's airspace created a window of uncertainty. Ho Chi Minh controllers waited for contact, but it never came. Meanwhile, Kuala Lumpur no longer had responsibility for the flight. It took 18 minutes before Vietnamese controllers asked if Kuala Lumpur had heard from the aircraft. They hadn't. Shock spread as Malaysia Airlines was contacted. Initially, the airline claimed their system showed the plane over Cambodia, but that wasn't true. It was only an estimate, based on its last known speed and direction. There was no real confirmation. With the plane missing, the first theories quickly surfaced. The first assumption: an explosion on board. The plane might have blown up mid-air due to a bomb or structural failure. Investigators quickly turned to the passenger list: 153 Chinese nationals, 38 Malaysians, 36 of other nationalities. 2 Iranian passengers were traveling on stolen passports. They became immediate suspects until it was discovered they were simply refugees fleeing to Europe. There was no evidence of criminal activity. Ultimately, no passenger was linked to terrorism. But soon, the technical data would tell a very different story. Investigators later realized the transponder wasn't the only system that had gone dark. The SATCOM system, which connects the plane via satellite to ground stations, was also disabled. This system is designed to send an alert if manually switched off, but no alert was triggered. How was SATCOM silenced without leaving a trace? The most accepted hypothesis: power was cut from the cockpit, shutting down the engine generators and forcing the plane onto minimal backup power. Without electricity, the satellite link simply went offline. And there's something even more disturbing: how resistance on board may have been silenced. Another possible maneuver from the cockpit was depressurization. By opening 2 specific valves, one in the front, one in the rear, the cabin pressure would drop. Passengers would lose consciousness in under a minute once their limited oxygen masks ran out. Meanwhile, pilots had access to oxygen masks with hours of supply, and that very day, those cockpit masks had been freshly refilled by maintenance crews. A coincidence? Far too convenient. But in the silence, a brief, desperate signal emerged. While flying over Penang, the co-pilot's cell phone briefly connected to a tower. This is unusual, as phones are required to be in airplane mode. Did he turn it on to try to contact someone? Was the co-pilot still in control? No one knows, but that fleeting signal suggests not everyone in the cockpit may have been aligned with the plan. One of the most important breakthroughs came from Inmarsat, the company operating the satellites the plane had used. Although SATCOM had been disabled, later a reconnection request was detected. This only occurs when the system regains power after being shut off. That ping allowed investigators to measure how long the signal took to reach the satellite. At light speed, that delay translates into distance, forming a circle, an arc, where the plane must have been. With each additional hourly ping, 7 more arcs were drawn, outlining a probable path. All evidence pointed to one clear conclusion. The plane kept flying for 7 more hours after vanishing from radar. And what those data reveal is astonishing. Analysis led to a global consensus. MH370 turned south and flew for hours over the Indian Ocean, away from any military or civilian radar. Any other route would have been detected by radars in Thailand, India, Australia, or Indonesia, but there was nothing. This reinforced the theory that the route was carefully chosen to avoid detection. The blackout was meticulous. One by one, systems were disabled. The Boeing 777 also has a system called ACARS, transmitting reports every 30 minutes until it, too, went silent. And how do you turn it off unnoticed? Not directly. Power must be cut from the cockpit. This requires deep knowledge of the aircraft, and disturbingly, everything was done at key moments, minimizing chances of detection. Every system cutoff, every turn, every depressurization, every reconnection, all suggested that whoever was in control had planned it in advance. And when investigators looked deeper into the captain, they found something impossible to ignore. During the investigation, Captain Zaharie's home simulator was examined. What they found was chilling. In early February 2014, just 1 month before the flight, Zaharie had practiced a route that included a detour into the southern Indian Ocean and a simulation of running out of fuel in that exact area. Not proof of intent. It could have been just an exercise. But the coincidence was too much to ignore, especially given that Zaharie was among the most experienced 777 pilots in the world. Even small details, tone of voice, or an unnecessary phrase hint at something more. There are oddities in the final transmissions. Zaharie reported maintaining altitude twice when once was enough. In the final exchange, he failed to repeat the new frequency, as protocol requires. His tone shifted, first relaxed, later more tense. None of these prove anything on their own, but within the broader context, they add to the unease about what was happening in the cockpit. Then came the final satellite data, the moment it all ended. In MH370's final ping, the plane was descending at 14,000 feet per minute, a rate no pilot can control. Such a descent only happens when both engines fail, leaving no power, no glide. This matched the estimated fuel endurance. MH370 had taken off with 7 hours and 31 minutes of fuel, and its last signal was sent 7 hours and 37 minutes later. The plane had run out of fuel and plunged into the sea. Years later, science would take a new step, and new clues would emerge. In 2023, scientists applied a technique using electromagnetic interference to analyze all waves that had crossed the region at the time of the disappearance. The study reconstructed a possible path which independently matched the satellite arcs. It even suggested the plane flew a figure-8 pattern, possibly to ensure no ships were nearby before impact. A cold, meticulous, and utterly disturbing maneuver. Fragments have been found, but the main wreckage remains lost. Over the years, pieces of MH370 have washed up on Africa's eastern shores, wing fragments, interior parts, all suggesting the aircraft indeed went down in the Indian Ocean. But the precise crash site remains unidentified. In 2017, the official search was suspended. Since then, independent groups have continued with their own funding and technology. In 2024, a U.S. company offered to restart the search on one condition. They'll only be paid if they find the plane. The most unsettling truth is that even with so much known, we still don't know everything. Today, more than a decade later, the MH370 case remains unresolved. We know the plane was diverted. We know systems were shut down manually. We know it flew for hours before finally crashing into the sea. But we don't know who did it, or why, or what truly happened in the cockpit during those last hours. Captain Zaharie remains the central figure in most suspicions, yet his family, friends, and colleagues describe him as kind, intelligent, peaceful, and dedicated. He left no note, no emotional clue, no farewell message. 239 people boarded MH370, and the entire world has spent over a decade searching for answers. Was it suicide, a cover-up for something bigger, or a failure that someone exploited to make the plane vanish? The truth, like the plane, remains lost in the dark, and until it is found, we won't know what really happened that night in the sky. This isn't just a technical mystery, it's about people, about families still waiting, and about a case that reminds us that even today, in the age of satellites and global radar, there are still things the world cannot explain. If this story impacted you as much as it did me, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think happened that night? Do you believe we'll ever find MH370? If you enjoy real cases explained in depth, subscribe to Enigmaze, hit the bell icon, and share this with someone who wants to understand this story as much as you do. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.